Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, and welcome to NerdTube. And it's time to talk about Game of Thrones. Oh, I apologize, House of Dragons, The Black Queen. This is season 1, episode 10, the finale. And I have to say that this has been probably, apart from maybe The Boys, the best show on all streaming sites right now. I'm thoroughly enjoying myself. I can't get enough of this particular show. It's it's the best thing available, and I've got nothing more than praise when it comes to this show. Now, I will be doing a play by play in a second. Just having a little bit of a technical issue right now. Let me just find out what's going on with my thing. Oh, here it is. Okie dokie. All right. So, with this particular episode, we got to see the perspective of the blacks. This was Rhaenyra, Daemon Targaryen, their children as well. Luke, especially, he had a major part to play in this particular episode. And usually, when it comes to certain characters, they never really get a look in, but then they finally do get a decent look in. Usually they get a look in because you know what, they're going to be going bye byes, and that's what happened to Luke in this episode. Now, I do have a lot of notes here, which I am going to be referring to right now. Thank you very much, Cheeto, for joining us. House of the. Well, I do recommend watching it. By the way, if you like Lord of the Rings, which you do, then you'll definitely love this. This is for me the best show on television at this particular moment in time. Now, I have taken a lot of notes regarding this particular episode because there was a lot to talk about. I mean, at the very beginning of this episode, Rhaenyra is talking to her son Luke, and she's basically telling him, like places like Driftmark, that's going to be yours. And he hasn't got really his sea legs. He knows Corlys Valerian was the person who was initially owning Driftmark, and he is a salesman. And Luke basically mentions that he gets sick in the sea, and he tries to play tough at times, but he really isn't. He's a bit of a gentle soul, so to speak. He gets a bit worried about certain things. His brother beats him up in fights on the beaches and stuff like that. He's not necessarily the best person in the confrontation, but he is a Targaryen after all. I mean, he's really a strong, but regardless, he's a Targaryen too. And he's told, you got to these are going to be your places, and you're going to have to make sure that once it is yours, that you rule over them, with pride. Now, Rhaenys, as we saw her last week, when she escaped King's Landing, because initially she was taken hostage by the High Towers, and she was kind of being forced to bend the knee towards Alicent and her contingent. But eventually she escaped on her dragon. Why she didn't kill the High Towers when she had a chance and end the war, we'll never know. I mean, it was a bit of bad writing from that perspective, but she did kind of explain herself when she finally reached the Targaryens and told them exactly what the hell's going on. She said it wasn't her battle to fight, but she obviously mentions the terrible news that Viserys is dead. And this kind of makes Alicent, in a way, start her labor process prematurely because obviously not only is her dad dead, but Aegon Targaryen, her her nephew or a brother. It's hard to say with all the incest that goes on with that particular family, but he has taken the throne. I mean, it was supposed to be hers. Her dad even said that that her daughter Rhaenyra would take over the Iron Throne once he dies. But the High Towers are going with tradition. As far as Alicent was concerned, Viserys changed his mind just before he died, but that was really to do with the Songs of Ice and Fire, and obviously a foretelling of what was going to be happening in the future. So she misunderstood that, of course, thinks that Aegon Targaryen is supposed to be the heir to the Iron Throne when it's not really the case. And now, obviously, he has taken the throne, and Rhaenyra is really pissed off. Even Damon's a little bit pissed off as well, like because he sees Rhaenys in their company and thinks to himself, they tried to make you bend the knee, but you're with us now. So she thinks he thinks there might be some betrayal regarding Rhaenys and why she's there. But he also thinks that the High Towers have basically killed him. So he's obviously got his mindset in a particular way. Now, because of all this terrible news that's happened, Rhaenyra gets into a lot of pain, and so we do see her giving birth prematurely, and this is one of the most squeamish scenes, probably since the first episode when we saw her mother having a forced cesarean and having to give birth to her brother, which was only air for a day. We see Rhaenyra walking about in labor, bleeding everywhere, and she's wearing a white outfit as well because that white outfit, is supposed to show it being stained with her blood. And she's like going, "Get it out of me!" And she's screaming so loud, and you see the baby popping out of her head, the head popping out and stuff like that. I mean, it was pulling no punches this episode when it came to that birth scene. And then the baby finally pops, and even before she gives full birth, like we hear in the halls of Dragonstone where Daemon is making his battle plans, we can hear her screams and groans echoing through the halls. It was it really kind of showed you how much agony she was going through, and something us men can never really fully appreciate. The pains of childbirth, and I very much like that scene. It was very good, very gruesome, very uncomfortable. So Jacaerys as well, prior to her mother popping the baby out, was kind of made the voice of her, her mother, like said to her, "You represent me," and then Jacaerys, who happens to be the older son, he tries to bark some orders to Daemon, but Daemon's not giving a shit about these orders, and he tells Jacaerys, "I'm going to show you what leadership means," and he takes Jacaerys outside, takes a couple of knights as well with them, and basically tells these knights to renew their vows to Rhaenyra. And if they don't renew their vows, then they will be killed, horrifically. And sorry, I do apologize. I've got a couple of birds here, and they're making a lot of noise, and they want out. So time to get them out, so that way they don't make too much noise. Okay. So she wants to. He wants to make these knights renew their vows, and if once they renew their vows, they'll be loyal to them, and if they don't end up showing loyalty, they will suffer terrible pain. He pulls out the dragon card as well, shows the dragon to these knights, so that these knights know that if they don't stay loyal to this particular side of the family, they're going to suffer a lot of pain. Now, when after Queen Rhaenyra gives birth and her baby dies, obviously, but we see the funeral scene pretty much happen straight afterwards. Like, her baby dies at birth, and she's already wrapping it up in those bandages. Something we've seen obviously in previous episodes, so it gives us an idea of how the sort of like the funeral and all of that sort of arrangements happened when it comes to Targaryens, their rituals and so on. And then we see one of the Eric twins arrive. Now, as we recall from the previous episode, there's these twins, and they are played by twin actors. It's not one actor playing dual roles. And one of them is loyal to Rhaenyra, and the other one, as we see later on in this episode, will be loyal to the Hightowers. This particular twin, he comes along, he bends the knee, produces the crown that Viserys wore on his head, gives it to Rhaenyra. So as soon as Rhaenyra has finished burying her child, she's already now being crowned as queen, and we see everyone, apart from, funny enough, Rhaenys, bending the knee to her. It was quite a moment, and those are sort of epic, sort of, monarch moments you do get in Game of Thrones, where everyone's loyal to a particular monarch, and it's pretty cool. So Queen Rhaenyra is now hearing from a council, and it's regarding which sort of families and houses are loyal to them. Now we do hear some familiar names like the Starks of Winterfell and the Baratheons of Storm's End, and we will see the Baratheons a little bit later. But what also is important is the number of dragons they have, because if there is going to be a war now between the Greens and the Blacks, then dragons are going to play their part. So we find out that the Blacks have 13 dragons to their name. They have less factions loyal to them who are siding with them, because a lot of them are quite traditionalist, and they're siding with the fact that a male person who is, somebody of Viserys' lineage has taken the throne, so they're going to side with them, regardless of Viserys wanting Rhaenyra to be the queen. So most people are siding, most houses are siding with the High Towers, but there is a balance there, and the balance is the dragons the blacks have. Hello, Jim, how you doing? And he also says hello to cousin Cheeto. Hope you're watching Game of Thrones, baby. It's the best show on television. I do mean that. Now, if you remember in episode 2, when Otto Hightower arrived at Dragonstone, and he was pissed off with Daemon on that particular occasion because Daemon wanted to be heir, to the throne and all of that. He was being very petulant. He was a younger man back then. And that particular time, Rhaenyra was on the side of Otto. He was on that particular side because she was heir to the throne. She was named heir by Viserys at the end of episode 1. But in this particular case, now Otto is on the other side. Rhaenyra is now on Daemon's side, and there's a fantastic scene in this clip here, where when they arrive on the bridge, Otto's men, to meet Daemon and basically explain their intentions and how it's going to be, Rhaenyra comes along and she lands on the other side, the back side of where Otto had arrived, basically trapping him in on the bridge because she's using her dragon as a blocker. And then she gets off her dragon. Sorry about my birds. She gets off her dragon and then starts walking through Otto's men like a proper power move. It was subtly done, but you obviously notice it. And it was just basically a state, an intention from her by saying, I'm not to be fucked with. And in that particular moment, Otto's men could have killed her there and then. It wouldn't have ended the war, but it would have definitely taken one of the biggest pieces out of the game, but they didn't. And it was a fantastic show of power by Rhaenyra. Now, even though Rhaenyra is showing her strength, I'm glad you just got home, Jim. Rhaenyra doesn't want to fight. I mean, she wants to find she needs to know who her allies are. Just going into battle willy-nilly is a bit stupid as far as she's concerned, because she doesn't know who her allies are yet, and she needs these things to be confirmed. There's lots of houses in Westeros, and all of these houses need to be spoken to, and so she knows who her allegiances lie with. Now, Otto does mention his terms, mentions the fact that Aegon is the king. This particular ceremony of theirs was witnessed by thousands. Unfortunately, thousands of those people were also killed. But Otto does make a deal with them he tries to make a deal with them by saying, look, if you bend the knee to us, you can still keep Dragonstone, you can still keep Driftmark. But despite the hostility, to a degree between all these guys, Rhaenyra is the sole woman in this particular bunch, basically says that she will give she will come to King's Landing and she will explain her terms soon enough. So there was no argy-bargy, and I never expected that to happen on that regardless, but I knew the tension was very high. It was a very good scene. So Daemon basically wants to go to war, and Rhaenyra doesn't want to go yet. She's obviously very hesitant. As I said earlier, she still wants to know who who our friends and allies are. And then she mentions the Song of Ice and Fire, and immediately we see the old Daemon come back. Now, a lot of people root for Daemon, but this is a show where you're not really supposed to root for anybody. This is a show where you have to watch a bunch of fucked up people trying to maintain power. And Daemon, to his own wife, his own niece, puts his hand right on her fucking throat like this and starts choking her, and choking her big time. And he's really pissed off because, as far as he's concerned, like these stories that that Rhaenyra was about to mention, these were deluded dreams, which Viserys would mention, and he doesn't like this shit. He says that battles are won with not with dreams, but they're won with dragons, something along those lines. Basically saying, all this foretelling and stuff like that is bullshit. If you want to win a war, just fucking get the dragons out. it's good to see Corlys back as well. Now he returns from the Stepstones, and he's awakened from his sleep. He's still suffering injuries, and his wife updates him. Wife, basically being Rhaenys, updates him, including the death of his brother and why his brother died. He understands why his brother died, but his brother was being a bit big-headed, and called Rhaenyra his son's bastards. So yeah, his son obviously, his brother would obviously get his head chopped off, and he knows that fucking Daemon did it. And so it makes you wonder where Corlys's allegiances will lie. But I think with a lot of persuasion from his wife, Corlys is still going to be on the side of Rhaenyra, and he offers his fleet to Rhaenyra once he gets out of bed and he's able to hobble a little bit. And we have to understand at this particular stage of his life now, he's not a young man anymore. Like during the course of season one, maybe a good 20 years has passed, possibly. So Corlys is not as young as he once was, but we see him hobbling. He offers his fleet, and then we also find out that we need to find out where the Starks lie and where the Baratheons lie when it comes to who their alliances are with. And so the princes, because they're able to fly dragons, are then basically considered to be messengers, envoys, to go to these particular houses and ask, where does your allegiances lie? So before the princes go off, we do see Daemon in a cave, and he's singing a Valyrian song, and then he's admiring this wild dragon, and this dragon's fucking huge. So he did mention earlier that there were wild dragons that are still there to be obtained. So I think this is one of them. And as Luke is one of the main focuses of this particular episode, we do see him arrive at Storm's End. Now, Storm's End is the place where the Baratheons live. It's obviously called Storm's End, but it's very stormy there. And Lord Baratheon is sitting on his throne, I guess, on his chair. He's got his own soldiers and stuff. And Luke is there basically to come make some terms with them, find out if he's still, staying faithful to his oath. And his oath is to be loyal to Queen Rhaenyra. But as soon as he arrives there, Aemond is there. Now, this is the same Aemond whose eye he cut out a few episodes ago when they were kids. So Aemond is already looking him up and down, ready for some payback. But before that happens, Luke basically mentions the terms of what he wants from the Baratheons, but the Baratheons not interested, because with Aemond there already, he's offered to marry one of Lord Baratheon's daughters, which obviously puts the Baratheons in strong stead to be part of this particular royal family. Now, Baratheon has 3 other daughters as well, but obviously Luke is betrothed to his cousin, so that's not going to be happening anytime soon. And with nothing else to offer, Luke is basically told to fuck off. And as he does fuck off, Aemond then wants his eye, and Aemond takes off his patch and shows off his eye, and we see a blue sort of sapphire sort of stone in his face. And you know what? That looks far better than wearing the eye patch. If I was him, I would not wear the eye patch. I'd just keep the blue stone in my face and let people look at me like that. But it looks so much more cooler than an eye patch. An eye patch doesn't do him any justice. The blue stone makes him look like a badass. But he tries to get back at Luke. Luckily for Luke, Lord Baratheon's men escort him back to his dragon. But we do see there's a massive difference between Luke's dragon and Aemond's dragon, because Aemond makes chase for him. Once they're in the skies and Luke is flying along in the skies, Aemond comes after him, and Aemond's dragon is fucking massive. It's humongous. I mean, when it was when his dragon had landed, it looked as big as the castles themselves, whilst Luke's dragon was a lot smaller. And I have to be honest with you, there's times where I almost forgot that I was watching Game of Thrones. I almost felt like I was watching Harry Potter. There was something very Harry Potterish about Luke, with his hair and his cloak and flying on dragons in the skies and stuff like that. It reminded me of some of those middle sequel Harry Potter episodes. So I think like the Goblet of Fire, or something along those lines. Anyway, we have our first dance of the dragon. and it's between Aemond and Luke. And Luke has no chance against Aemond, but because his dragon is smaller and his dragon is slimmer, I guess, and all of that, he's able to fly through the crevices of cliffs and mountains. So a place where Aemond's humongous dragon can't squeeze into, and it's a good way of avoiding Aemond. And the funny thing is, like being in the clouds and being in the rain, in a way, should be good cover for Aemond. Sorry, for Luke. But eventually, once Luke evades Aemon, and before evading him, he does give him a fireball to the face from his own dragon. But once he evades him, he leaves the cloudy skies and he's open and clear skies, and he thinks he's gotten away from him. But on this particular occasion, Aemon's dragon has gone a bit mad, and I don't think Aemon's able to control his dragon, and his dragon wants payback, and his dragon ends up taking a big bite out of Luke's dragon, cutting it in half pretty much. I mean, I watched the scene a couple of times. You don't see what happens with Luke. Did Luke get eaten by Aemon's dragon? Who knows? He might be falling to his death. He might have already fallen to his death, and we didn't see it because we just see the dragon falling down, and afterwards, there's various things that could have happened. But you could see on Aemon's face that he knew he fucked up. It wasn't like, oh shit, I shouldn't have done that. I mean, sorry, it wasn't a look of, oh no, this is a terrible thing that's happened. It's like, oh shit, I've really fucked up. I have fucked up beyond belief. And that was a great look he gave, because all he wanted was the kid's eye. He didn't want to kill him, but now he's killed him. And and obviously, the news gets back to Rhaenyra, and Rhaenyra has already had a terrible last couple of days. She first of all, she finds out that her dad's dead. Then he gives birth to a daughter prematurely, and her daughter dies at child's birth. And then her second oldest son gets killed as well. I mean, it's not been a good couple of days for Rhaenyra. And then I think you realize that, peace is no longer on the table. Shit's about to kick off, because we see that look on her face of like anger, sadness, self-destruction, even, so to speak, revenge, all of these things, in one emotion, one facial emotion. It was a great look for Emma Darcy. And that was the end of the episode. I mean, it was absolutely fantastic, and I wanted to have so much more from what I saw. It was wonderful. This whole season has been wonderful. Every episode of House of Dragons season 1 has been an 8 out of 10 at minimum. It's been that good. Obviously, the first episode being the pilot, it's very hard to get a very good pilot episode of any show. But it kind of reminds us what Game of Thrones was all about, with that smorgasbord of violence and skullduggery, nudity, sex, castration, even murders, all of that. We got it all in that first episode. And then as the show panned out, we got just more juiciness in each episode. We got to understand the characters we had already met, and then we got to meet new characters as well and how they operate. Larys being one of them, a fascinating character in Larys as well. Even the White Worm, this person just seemed like somebody Daemon was fucking on the side, but she was like a woman who had her nose and ear to the city and regarding the whispers and stuff like that. Very, very fascinating character as well. And even like Viserys, so good. I mean, a lot of people were going on about how amazing Matt Smith has been in this show, and he has been good. But so is everybody else. Everybody else in this show. Rhys Ifans as Otto Hightower, fucking fantastic. Paddy Considine as Viserys, amazing, absolutely amazing. Alicent, fantastic. I think Olivia Newton, I think her name is, amazing. Emma Darcy, I mean, I've always said, and I'll say this again, and I'm sorry for sounding so chauvinistic. I've never known her to be so beautiful until I saw her on this show. On this show, I apologize, because Emma Darcy, for me, is not really much of a looker, but my God, making her look like a Targaryen. I'm drooling at how beautiful they are, and yeah, long may that continue. Even the child actors are fantastic. Some of the scenes with the child violence as well. It's not, maybe it sounds a bit sadistic saying stuff like that, but it's just so well executed here. The dragons as well are really good, and then the newer characters that come in, halfway through the show, already leaving their mark, like Aemon Targaryen and Aemon and Damon. They're very similar, but they're on opposite sides, obviously, and it'll be interesting to see where we go with those characters as well, because they are the wild cards for each team. Damon's fucking crazy, but he's very useful. Aemond is fucking crazy, but he's very useful. I would say Aemond's a lot more colder than Damon. Damon tries to act cold, but there's just moments where he just can't contain himself. Whilst Aemond is a lot more colder, and he seems to be educated and all of that. Yeah, there's some really good, interesting characters. Even some of the characters who we don't spend much time with, when they have that opportunity just to shine just a little bit, they seem to be fascinating. Like Aegon Targaryen, the elder brother. Like, we just found out he just likes to fuck around and do nothing, and then like the burden of being king is just something he doesn't want, but then he takes it on board. It's a really good character arc. His wife, sister, the girl who likes bloody insects and stuff like that. Even when we had brief moments with her, it was great. It really was. It was really well executed. I thoroughly enjoyed many of these scenes. They were done so well, and the characters, how brief we got them. The Eric twins, really good stuff. Hardly spent any time with them, but when we did get them, they were great. Kristen Cole, didn't really see. Obviously, we're not going to see him in this particular episode, but he was good. Um, the Kingsguard, the leader of the Kingsguard, his name escapes me, but he's played by Graham McTavish. Excellent as well. Like the casting and the acting by everyone involved, not just Matt Smith, because it seems to be like Matt Smith is the only good actor in this. It's not. It's an insult to everyone else that if Matt Smith is the only person getting praised, because there's a lot of actors here who deserve a variety of different awards. This show should smash it in the Emmys coming up, because it's just been a breath of fresh air. And I say that in the best way possible, because we haven't had Game of Thrones for a while, and what we did get from Game of Thrones recently prior to this was shit. It really was. It went full on Hollywood, and Game of Thrones only needs to be a bit Hollywood here and there, not full on. Moments of, like, certain moments of Hollywood nature is good, but season 8 was full on Hollywood, and really we needed more fleshed out. The Battle of the Bastards was a good Hollywood moment. That scene where they're in the land of always winter, on the other side of the wall, and then they start coming across White Walkers, and people are turning into White Walker zombies, and they're escaping them as quickly as possible. I remember that one giant just walking into the river, even though it's freezing fucking cold, just trying to escape him. It was great. It was absolutely great. Those were some amazing scenes. And then they just had to ruin it with season 8, especially season 7 wasn't too great, but season 8 was just the worst. They wrapped it up just for the sake of it. And I'm hoping they don't do that this time around. There is a real desire for this show to be extremely successful. I don't know how many seasons they can pull out of this. I don't know if it's going to be like one generation of Targaryen families, or are they going to go different generations, because this is a Targaryen civil war. A lot of Targaryens are going to die. A lot of characters that we're very familiar with, they're going to be dead before the show's over. So it's going to be interesting to see how many of them make it. And then do we go like maybe 50, 60 years in the future, and we get this civil war still going on with different factions, new generations of Targaryens basically taking off where their grandfather left off. I mean, it's interesting to know where we go in the future of the show, it's fascinating. There's just so much that can be done, and I look forward to all the spin-offs that we get as well regarding being in the world of Westeros. I would love to spend some time in other parts of the lands like Essos as well, and maybe just if you look at some of the stories about the locations within the world of Game of Thrones, there's some fascinating areas like Yi, which is supposed to be like China, so to speak, or like the far east of Game of Thrones, and I would love to see some of that. There's this one particular city called Ashai, which is like very dark city and magical city, but in not in a nice way, but in a more in a more darker way. Like the sun hardly shines there and stuff like that. The city's very dark. People don't really roam the streets. Most of the buildings have like, even though there's like window, like you can see windows and stuff like that. Only most of the buildings are not lit up on the inside. Only a handful of rooms are lit up on the inside, and there's no children there as well. I want to see all these places. I want to see all these crazy places. Like there's a tribe of women warriors. All the women, the men are not warriors. All the women are warriors, and obviously the women have to mate with the men in order to create more population. But they only mate with certain men so that they can create the perfect offspring. All the other men are eunuchs, which means that they get the snippety snip. And so only a handful of men are worthy of fucking these warrior women, and getting them pregnant and having offspring and all of that. Yeah, it's crazy. It's I want to see that shit though. I want to see all of this. It's just fascinating to me. It's such an amazing world. The girl who was Daenerys' translator. She had her head chopped off by the mountain. Yeah, she comes from this island where everyone's a pacifist, and no, they're not fighters; they're just lovers, and they have a good time. But if you live on that island, you're fine. But if you're a foreigner who comes on that island, you'll get bitten by a mosquito or a bug there, and if you if you stay on that island too long, basically you'll die. So in a way, the people who live on that island, they're safe from outsiders, because outsiders, they spend too long on that island, they'll die from the exposure of that island. Only the people who live there, who are immune to it, have nothing that happens to them. But because the people who live on that island are very beautiful, a lot of them get used as slaves. It's crazy. Yeah, there's just so much in this world. I want to explore it all, not just Westeros. It's more to Game of Thrones, House of Dragons, this whole universe than just Westeros. There's other parts of Essos I want to see as well, and I really hope we get to do that in future spin-offs of Game of Thrones and House of Dragon. Anyway, I've been yabbering on way too much. Time to give this episode a rating. It's going to be getting a solid 8 out of 10 for me, and this whole season is getting a 10, because every episode of Game of House of Dragon has been a minimum 8 out of 10. I've given a lot of episodes. I don't think I've given any episode a 10 out of 10. I've given episodes 8s or 9s out of 10. It's been that good. And for a show to be of that level, of that standard, where pretty much everything is way above average, you have to give this entire season a 10. Because, not one episode being a 7, everything for me being an 8 or a 9, yeah, the season gets a 10 for me. Fantastic. I cannot wait until next week. I'm sorry, until next season. And that'll be about a year and a half fucking wait. It's ridiculous. They need to do what they used to do with seasons and have it come out every fucking year. Now it's every couple of years. I'm not getting any younger. I'm in my mid fucking 40s. I need this shit out now. So yeah, I can't wait. Until then, I guess when it comes to fantasy, I think Willow on Disney Plus will be the next bit of fantasy, because Lord of the Rings is already done. So I look forward to that. That'll be coming out in November, and November is not that far away. And you'll see me tomorrow for obviously talking about Quantum Leap. I'll be doing it with this guy, Jim Landscape. And then on Wednesday, we'll be doing Andor, and Thursday, we'll be doing Lower Decks, as well as me bringing out a review of the Jeffrey Epstein documentary. It's called Filthy Rich. It's on Netflix. I've been watching that. Seen 2 episodes. Once I get the other 2 episodes done, I'll do a review of that as well. So don't forget to like, share, subscribe to NerdTube, the greatest YouTube channel you never heard of. Take care. Oh, excuse me. Take care.